Hi, I'm Ariel and I'm here today with Skully Designs for our 365-day project. We're into day 8 and I've already had quite the conundrum. One of the materials I needed for today's project was not on hand. I didn't know what I was going to do. While rifling through some of my materials though, I found this great fabric that my girlfriend Melissa gave me. Thank you, Melissa. You saved the day. So here's the fabric that she gave me. It's a nice blanket fleece with kind of a textured checkered pattern already in it. And I thought this would be perfect to make some quick, simple, easy scarves. So that's what we're going to make today. So what you'll need for this project is a nice fleece material, a ruler, rotary cutter, scissors, cutting mats, some straight pins to pin it together, and I'm also going to use this painter's tape to help guide me later on. You may or may not need it, and of course you'll need a sewing machine. So let's get started. I'm going to put this aside, and I've already cut my fabric. Most scarves are about 7 inches by 60 inches. Now this fabric was already 65 inches in length. I did go ahead and cut it to a width of 15 inches. I know, I just said 7 inches is the normal width of a scarf though, didn't I? Well, we're going to be folding this fabric in half. So once we account for our seam allowances, even though I've cut it to a width of 15 inches, it will end up being about 7 inches wide. That being said, you can make your scarf any width or length you want. Keep in mind when you're choosing how much fabric you need that you will be folding it in half for your actual width with 1/2 inch seam allowances. So, that being said, I am going to go ahead on to the next step since mine is already cut and prepped. And mine will be a little bit longer since fabric's 65 inches long, but that's all right. If you're making a scarf for the kids, you can make it shorter as well. Now I'm going to put some fringe on my scarf. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure about 5 inches in on each side and just mark it with a pin because I don't want to sew that area at all. I want to start 5 inches in to sew. And then after I do that, we're going to go along the edge. We're just going to pin the 2 open sides with the right side facing in. So this is the outside of the fabric. We're going to pin all the way down so it's like a tube. We're going to go down to this other end and we're going to stop 5 inches in again. So take a pin and mark that also. We're going to leave that and not sew that section because that we're going to cut for our fringe later. So that's what you're going to do. Leaving your 5 inches at each end, you're going to pin all the way down. And then we're going to sew this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making one giant tube. So while you're cutting your fabric and pinning yours together, I'm going to finish pinning mine and then I'm going to sew my tube. And we'll be back. I've gone ahead and I've stitched all along the one open side with, again, the right sides facing in. So this is the outside. I left 5 inches at each end because that's where our fringe will be. Next, I'm just going to turn our tube right side. Remember when you're stitching to back stitch when starting and back stitch again when you end to secure those stitches well. I'm just going to take this tube now and pull it right way. So this will be how our scarf actually looks. And what I'm going to do now is straighten it out, and I'm going to iron it. I'm going to find that seam and get it all straightened out. Maybe I don't even need to iron it, just flatten it. And on both sides, once I get it nice and flat, make sure that seams out as much as possible. I'm going to do a decorative, just securing stitch all the way down each end. And for that, I'm just going to put the fabric about 1/4 inch to the edge of my foot as I do that. Now I'm going to make sure that I start again that 5 inches in, and I'm going to stop with those stitches at the other end 5 inches. So we're still not touching this because this we're going to cut for our fringe later. So that's what I'm going to do now. Go ahead on each side, just do decorative edge to secure that so the fabric's not going all over the place. And I'm going to do that all the way down. And when I'm done with that, I'll be back. I've got my decorative edge all sewn up on both sides. Now the one side is a little bulkier since that's where I originally made my tube, but that's okay. I use black thread. I usually don't match up my threads, but I used a longer stitch rather than the regular smaller straight stitch. This one does like 3 every needle rotation, I guess it would be called. So I did a longer stitch, but with this fabric I don't think it's as noticeable. And then, you know, I can't make a straight line for the life of me usually, so I did pin it up before I did those decorative edges on both sides. And as I did it, I remembered to leave my 5 inches on both ends so that I wouldn't mess that up. And then I also have this little metal aligner that is magnetic and attaches to my sewing machine to also help me make that straight edge. And of course, I backstitched when I started, and I also backstitched when I ended to secure those stitches. Okay, so moving right along. It's like the Muppets. Moving right along. Okay. What I like to do now, we need to make a straight stitch to secure this before we cut it for our fringe. And since I can't make a straight line, and this is kind of going to be right in the center, I'm going to use this painter's tape, and with the ruler I'm going to go straight across my 5 inches, if I can get the tape straight. I'm going to measure my 5 inches in again, and then I'm going to put painter's tape straight along the ruler's edge. If I can get this, I can show you. Okay. And I'm going to use this as my guide as I'm sewing across so that I don't go over or under, to help me make that straight line, since I won't be able to use a liner and I won't be able to use my guide since we're so far in. I'm going to use the tape on both ends. So I'm going to go ahead and tape the other end up, and I'm going to do just a straight stitch across to secure that. And we're almost done with our warm scarves, and I'm really loving the way this is turning out so far. So I'll be back. My ends are all sewn up now, and that tape did wonders helping me get a straight edge. I did go back to a tight straight stitch when I did it, and don't forget to back stitch both ends. So now all we have left to do is to cut our fringe. You can use your scissors or your rotary cutter if you want, whatever you feel more comfortable with. First I am going to cut straight down this line. When you cut, Make sure not to cut your stitches that you did, otherwise you're going to unravel all that. So I'm just going to cut and be very, 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 very careful. Every time I tell you not to do something, I end up doing it. I think I jinx myself. So I'm going to be super careful coming down and cutting this very end. It helps that my scissors here that I'm using aren't that great. I cut backwards too. It won't even let me cut to that edge because of my scissors. So you can use your ruler if you want to kind of get an idea. I'm going to do mine. I'm going to try to go about an inch. This fabric tends to curl a little bit right away, so it's not going to be exact, but I'll have them. And I'm doing front and back separate. You can cut both together if you want. Like I said, these aren't going to be exact. It helps that my fabric has a little kind of checkered texture that I can follow along. And you would think with that I could, you know, cut a straight line, but you know, who knows. Being very careful. And actually, I might cut these in half because they're kind of thick. I'm going to cut them, I'm going to keep cutting them an inch and see how it looks at the end. But I think I'm going to go a ½ inch because they're looking pretty thick there. And I think I want my fringe to be a little bit thinner. So I just keep going along here. Cutting this. I say I'm going to be exact, and then I get like anxious, and to get it done I want to just jump ahead. Well, you get the idea. So there's one side. I'm going to flip it over to the other side. Like I said, I think I'm going to cut these in half. I want them a little bit thinner, and then I'll be back with our final project. Here's my finished scarf. I did go with a ½ inch on the fringe cuts. I think it looks a lot better, and I think it's absolutely marvelous. Thanks for joining us in today's project with Skully Designs, and we hope you come back tomorrow for our next project.